today, in the second unit that we have been discussing, I'll be talking about the water resources. Up till now, you would recall that we have talked about the forest resources, and we have also talked about the inequitable distribution and inequitable consumption of the natural resources. So we are now carrying the discussion forward, and we'll be discussing the water resources today. So as far as the use of water is concerned, you would find that most of the water is used in agriculture. So almost 70% is consumed by agriculture for cultivation purpose, for irrigation purpose, and the domestic use is just 8%. Now as far as the evolving conditions are concerned, you would if you are reading the newspapers on a regular basis, you would come to know that there are water stresses developing in different parts of the country and different parts of the globe as well. If you look at the global scenario, you would find that 31 countries are already short of water, which means that they do not have sufficient water to feed their population for the requirements of their own population. And 48 countries shall be facing serious shortage. Now this is according to one study which was conducted. So by 2025, this number of countries which would be facing shortage of water, it would increase to 48. And even in India, we are facing a scenario, we are going to face a scenario by 2025 when our water availability will be at critical level. The water stress would reach a critical level, and there would be so many parts in our country where the water availability would be much below the local requirements. In fact, even as of today also, there are so many parts in the country where the water availability is much below their requirement, right? Again, one reason why water stress is increasing is because now we have got a large population. If you look at the global population, it is around 8.5 billions, almost 850 crore people. So naturally it is going to be difficult for us to manage water for the requirements of these many people. And we are not talking only about the consumption. We are not talking about only the drinking water, the potable water. There are other requirements also, for example, for taking bath, for washing purpose, for various other purpose, for cooking food. So all this is basically a very big amount, and this is one reason why most of the places on this globe, they've started facing water stress. Again, there's a lot of wastage also. Even in your city, in your place, you would have seen so many pipe leakages every single day. So even here, there are so many instances of water wastage, and because of which, what is happening, the ultimate result is that we are increasing our fresh water withdrawals. So fresh water withdrawals from where? Fresh water withdrawals from the nature. So we are making use of more and more fresh water which is available in the nature. We are sourcing this water from the various resources, be it rivers, be it ponds, be it lakes, be it the underground water. So this consumption and this withdrawal of water from the nature is increasing gradually. Now there are water conflicts also which are taking place between upstream and downstream communities. Let us first understand what are upstream and downstream communities. For example, most of the rivers in North India, they originate in the Himalayan region, right? So I'll be taking example of the Himalayan region. So the river originates from a glacier, and then it starts moving, and then eventually it empties its water into a sea or an ocean, right? In this course, right from the beginning in the glacier till it empties this water into the ocean or the sea, it traverses through so many regions. The regions which it passes through first, they would be called the upstream regions or the upstream communities, and the regions which it passes through later, at a later stage, they would be called the downstream communities. I'll give you an example. For example, if you talk about the river Brahmaputra, you would understand that it is basically it originates in China, and from there, in fact, it originates in Tibet, which is basically part of China only. So if it originates in Tibet or China, and then from there it enters India, so the upstream community will be the Chinese community or the Tibetan community. So China would be the upstream country, while we would be the downstream country. On the other hand, if the same river then flows from India to Bangladesh, then in this particular case we would be the upstream, while the Bangladesh would be the downstream country. Is this fine? And there have been so many conflicts between the upstream and downstream communities regarding use of the river water, right? And the reason is, again, the reason is the same: scarcity. There is scarcity, there is water stress, and so even river water is being valued a lot by all the countries through which the particular river passes, or all the regions through which a particular river passes. And you would see that there have been so many such conflicts. China, India, have given you example. Then India, Pakistan. Rivers like Ravi, Satluj, Vyas, all these rivers, they enter Pakistan from India. So basically Pakistan is the downstream, and our country is the upstream country. And there have been conflicts regarding regarding the amount of water that will be used up by a particular country, regarding the various river projects, dams that can be built on a river or on a particular part of river. So there are so many conflicts, so many issues between the upstream and the downstream countries. And example, we have talked of the Indo-Pakistan example. Within India also you can see such conflicts taking place between different states. Haryana, Delhi, in the case of Satluj-Yamuna link, the link that joins Satluj and Yamuna and passes through Punjab and Haryana. So basically the conflict is between Punjab and Haryana. Basically Punjab is the upstream and the Haryana is the downstream. So please make this correction. Then we have got Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, the river Kaveri, a very, very well-known issue between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, which is yet to be resolved, because Karnataka is the upstream state while Tamil Nadu is the downstream state. So there are always conflicts regarding the amount of water that each state should be getting, what would be the allocation of water to each of the two states, how much water should be released at what particular point of time, whether a dam should be built or not. So these kind of conflicts are very, very common, and the basic reason is scarcity. Now, as far as the damage to the water resources are concerned, water pollution of water resources, and this happens because of some very prominent reasons. The most prominent ones I am discussing here: overuse of fertilizers and pesticides. What will happen? Overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, which is common with a country like India, where we have almost half of our population is into agriculture, cultivation, and we are a prominent food producer. So naturally it is something that is common, that is very, very common here in our country. We use a lot of fertilizers, we overuse the fertilizers without looking at the soil nutrient profile, and then what will happen? Overuse will basically, the extra amount that you are using in your fields, what will happen? It will seep down, it will percolate down, and it would pollute the ground water table. It will pollute the water table, and this has happened in our states of Punjab and Haryana, where so many cancer cases have been seen in the last few decades just because of this overuse of fertilizer. The fertilizer and the pesticide seeps down, the extra amount seeps down, percolates down, and it actually pollutes the water table. And when the same water is drawn out through some wells or through submersible pumps and is consumed by people in the local community, they are more prone to, they become more susceptible to diseases like cancer, right? Again, water pollution because of household sewage being emptied directly into the rivers, industrial effluents being emptied directly into the rivers. Though we have got regulations against this, we have got the State Pollution Control Board, but still so many industries have been found to dump their effluents into the river. while the provision in the law is that they should be having a sewage treatment plan, and then only the treated water should be released into the nature. But many a times these provisions are not at all adhered to. Again, global warming is one reason which is also endangering our water resources. Now, what happens in the case of global warming? The weather patterns don't remain the same. You would have noticed in the last few years, many a times, the rainfall generally does not take place. It does not rain that much in July, August, September, or June, July, August, September, which are considered to be monsoon months, but it rains many a times in other months also. These are some changes in the weather pattern which has happened because of global warming, and more number of extreme weather events are witnessed. Extreme weather events means if there is a rainfall, there would be extremely intense rainfall, lot of rainfall, and in a very short period of time. On the other hand, if there is going to be no rainfall, then it would be extremely dry conditions, not at all, no rainfall at all. So these are extreme weather events. If it would be hot, it would be very hot. If it is cold, it's going to be very cold. So these are the extremes. So these kind of extremes are being witnessed on a regular basis nowadays because of the global warming. And flash floods. Now, why do flash floods happen? Extreme weather events, I told you. Large amount of rainfall in a very short span of time, which means there would be flooding of the area in which this particular rainfall is being witnessed, and this is called flash flood. Flash because they appear in a flash. So maybe in 30 to 40 minutes or maybe in 1 hour, you would find so much of water logging taking place. So much of rainfall there is so much rainfall because of which the water logging takes place, and there is flood-like situation. So these are called flash floods. In fact, in the last 10 to 12 years, we have seen flash floods. The prominent flash floods have been witnessed in Leh, in the Ladakh region, then in Chennai and in Mumbai also. So these kind of events are being witnessed on a more frequent, regular basis. Now, what are the solutions? How can we manage our water sources better? How can we prevent them from getting polluted, and how can we ensure that they are available for sustainable use by mankind? So these are some of the solutions. First, use organic fertilizers instead of the chemical fertilizers. Again, in organic fertilizers, the level of productivity is a little less than the chemical fertilizers. However, if you can use the organic fertilizers and reduce, I'm not saying eliminate the use of chemical fertilizers, but just reduce your use of chemical fertilizers, that will help prevent pollution of the water resources. What do we mean by organic fertilizers? Biomass, for example. Gobar, we have been using cow dung in our fields. That is a normal practice in this part of the world. Then instead of chemical pesticides, we can use neem, we can use cow urine, and there have been so many experiments going on, and these organic pesticides they are now being used by so many farmers. So this could be one way of reducing the pollution of water resources. Then we can go for integrated pest management. Why? See, basically 70% of the water is consumed by agriculture, right? And if while cultivating our crop we use a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, what will happen? Ultimately the water table would be polluted. Even if there is a rainfall, the rainfall would also carry away the extra fertilizer or the chemical, and then that particular chemical which is getting carried away by the rainwater will again pollute some other water resources also. So what we are trying to say is that if instead of using chemical fertilizer, we use some other techniques to control pests. Pests means, what do we mean by pests? Pests means, for example, chuhe, the rodents which might damage your crop. Nowadays we are seeing this tiddy attack which can damage your crop. So these are pests. So how can we manage these pests without using the chemical pesticides? And we are not using chemical pesticides so that we can prevent pollution of water resources. How can we manage that? We can manage that by going for integrated pest management. What will happen here? Here we will be preserving pest predators. So we will be also rearing those species of animals or birds which actually feed on pests. So whenever there is a pest attack, these species which were cultivated which can feed on these pests, they would be let free, and then they would consume the pests, and this way the pest attacks can be taken care of, they can be controlled, and the damage can be limited, right? Again, we can come up with pest resistant seeds which are not impacted by, which are not harmed by the pests. So these kind of innovations we can bring in. This will help us reduce our usage and dependence on the chemical pesticides. Again, we can go for water efficient cultivation, wherein we do not need much water to irrigate our crops. Low water intensive crops, there are some crops which are low water intensive. On the other hand, there are crops like sugarcane and paddy, they require a lot of water. So we can switch from these kind of crops to those kind of crops which require much less water, at least in those places where there is a lot of water scarcity. So maybe jawar, bajra, ragi, these kind of crops can be grown which do not require a lot of water for their growth. And we can go for techniques like drip irrigation. In drip irrigation, what will happen, the water is made available exactly at the point where the crop is. So this way the water reaches the crop roots and it nourishes the crop. There is less requirement of water in such cases because the water is not getting wasted. It is not getting wasted in the area which is surrounding the crop. It is only being used where the crop roots are there. So the water is provided directly to the crop roots and drip by drip. Why? So that less amount of evaporation may take place and more of that water might be absorbed by the crop. So that is the whole idea behind drip irrigation. So we can go for these kind of techniques. You can read about drip irrigation on the internet as well. Again, we can go for effluent treatment. In fact, this is something that is provided for in these various laws that we have, and in fact State Pollution Control Board keeps a check on this. So basically what we are saying, that the industrial effluent should be treated before they are released into the nature, so that they was released, they do not damage the nature, they do not cause pollution, they do not damage the other water sources in the vicinity, right? Now let's talk about floods. Floods is basically abundance of water, a lot of water. And how do floods take place? Deforestation in the catchment area. We have talked about catchment, I believe, earlier. We have talked about the watersheds. So catchment is not very different, though it is slightly different from watershed. Now catchment is, now you have a look at this particular picture. All the rainfall which will fall in this particular area, all the rain that falls here will actually drain through this particular stream, and that is why all this area will be called the catchment of this particular river or this particular stream. Is this okay? So the whole area which drains its water, which it receives from rainfall, that water is drained through a common point. The whole area is called a catchment. Right now this is an example of a catchment. This is fine. So what happens if there is a deforestation in catchment area? You know that the trees do what? Their roots hold on to the soil, and they also since they hold on to the soil, they prevent soil erosion, number one. Now what will happen if there is a deforestation? Trees are not there, trees have been cut down, logging has taken place, then what will happen? See, the rainwater, when the forest is there, what will happen? The rainwater would not move freely very fast, and because it would move relatively slowly, there would be greater opportunities for the rainwater to percolate down and to recharge the water table. However, if there are no forests, the forest has been cut down, the trees have been cut down, what will happen? The rainwater would not percolate down and it would be carried off, and it would be carried down the topsoil. It would carry down the topsoil along the hill slopes. So the rainwater is not getting obstructed because of the forest, so it will keep moving at a very fast speed and it will flow down the hill slope. And while it flowing down the hill slope, because the trees are not there, the soil would not be able to remain stuck at its position. It would also get carried down. It would also get carried off by the water, and ultimately the topsoil gets carried off and it gets carried down the hill slopes. So down the hill slopes the water will come, and along with water the topsoil would also come. So in one way there would be a lot of soil erosion. On the other, see what will happen. This surface runoff will silt up the river. Now this slurry formed from water and soil will move down the hill slope, and what will happen then, it will start getting dumped into rivers, and the rivers would be blocked. So this silt would block the rivers. Now have a look at this particular picture. You will find the same thing happening here. Now this has been blocked. See this channel, this river channel has been blocked because of the silt which has gathered here, and this silt has come because the rainwater when fell through these slopes, it also carried these, this mud and the other small leaves and other particles along, and now they have blocked the channel. Now this channel is blocked. Now what will happen after this? When this channel is blocked, the water would keep coming. The water is flowing in this direction. This channel is blocked. The water will get accumulated here in this area, and at one point of time the pressure would be so much that this particular blockage which has been caused because of the silt, what will happen? This blockage would be cleared by the pressure of the accumulated water, and the water would flow down. See, this is the flow. The water would flow down in a moment, in a flash, very fast, and this sudden downflow of water will ultimately lead to flooding in the plains. So somewhere here flooding would start taking place. So this is one way, this is one reason, this is one way how flooding takes place in the plains, right? But then there are other reasons which also cause flooding and which basically contribute to flooding of plains. See, encroachment on the flood plains. Now have a look at this particular example. This is, what do we mean by the floodplain? This area is basically the floodplain. Whenever there is a lot of water, there is a lot of rainfall, there is a lot of water in this river, the water would spill over and would occupy these areas. And this would be on the other bank also. So not only on one bank but on the other bank. So the water would spill over and occupy this area. However, if constructions have been done, what will happen? No area is left for the water to spill over. Naturally, this would cause flooding here. Up till now, no construction was there. So even if the water spilled over into these areas, there was not a big concern. It was not a big concern because there was no habitation in this area. But since now they have been encroached upon, houses have been constructed, buildings have been constructed, the water will have no other place to go to. The water would basically cause flooding here. The river water would cause flooding here. And secondly, if there is a lot of construction, the water would not percolate down. Had there been no construction, what would happen? The water that gets spilled over to this area, this would percolate down and recharge the ground water table. But this would not be happening in this case because houses have been constructed, buildings have been constructed. So river water spills into floodplains during rain, and these are floodplains, and the ones which have been shown here on which we have constructed these houses, they are basically floodplains, and they act as a sponge. They absorb extra water. However, since to settle more and more people, we have encroached into these floodplains in most of our urban cities. What happens is there is a lot of flooding in the urban areas. Again, in our urban areas, there is a lot of cement and concrete surfaces. We find abundance of cement and concrete surfaces, and you do not find surfaces without any cement or concrete cover. So what will happen if there is cement or concrete cover on the surfaces? What will happen? The water would simply have no channel to percolate down. It would not be able to percolate down. It would not be able to get absorbed by the soil. Had there been no cement or concrete surfaces, what would have happened? The water would have got absorbed by the soil, and then it would have percolated down. It would have recharged the water table. But this would not happen in these cases. Why? Because most of the surfaces are hard surfaces. Water cannot seep across the hard surfaces, so water will remain at the top, and this would lead to flooding. No percolation, as I mentioned and described, right? Now let us talk about the other extreme, which is the scarcity of water. The causes for droughts in India is failure of monsoon, because you know that most of our cultivation is still dependent on rainfall. Most of our cultivation is still rain fed, and if the monsoons fail, there are chances of droughts. Again, the decrease in forest cover can also cause droughts. How? See, this is the mechanism. The forest cover is not there. First thing, there would be less amount of rainfall, and even if there is rainfall, the water would keep moving freely because there is no vegetation to hold it back. So it would keep moving freely. It would in fact cause soil erosion. On the other hand, had there been forest, what would have happened? Forest would have acted as a barrier in the flow, against the flow of the rainwater, and the speed of the flow would have decreased, and the water would have got the time and the opportunity to percolate down, and this would have recharged the groundwater table, and it would have recharged the underground stores, water stores, which we known as aquifers. So they would have got recharged, and whenever there is a dry season, these stores can be made use of by digging a well, or maybe by digging a pond, or maybe by using various electric pumps and other such equipments. Now, since percolation has not happened because of lack of trees, lack of forest, because of scarcity of forest, because of less availability of forest, percolation has not happened. So naturally the underground stores have not been fully charged, so naturally you would have much less water to consume during the dry season, and this is one reason that the droughts occur. We simply are not able to get our underground stores, get our aquifers recharged during the time when the rainfall is abundant, and that is why when there is a dry season, we simply do not have sufficient stores for us, and there is a lot of scarcity of water. Now see, this is what I am trying to tell you. Whenever there is rainfall, see, the rainfall is taking place, and this is the soil surface. You can understand here the trees are growing here and the vegetation is here, so this is the surface and this is the top part of the soil. So the water will seep down, it will percolate down, and this is the water table. Water table is that level below which the water is available throughout the year. So this is the water table, and this is basically now getting recharged by rainfall, and whenever there is a dry season, we can draw out water from here. But if the recharge is not taking place because the forests are not there and the water is not settling down, the rainwater is not settling down here, it is flowing because there is no vegetation to hold it back, the water does not settle down here, what will happen? It would not, since it is not settling here, it would not be able to percolate down, it would not be able to recharge these aquifers, and then in the dry season we would not have much water to use for our purpose, as the water table would have gone down. What is the consequence of a drought? You can see lack of water is known as jalkal. Because of lack of water, there is less amount of vegetation, chara, fodder, which is known as trinkal, and the crops are also damaged because of lack of water, lack of irrigation, and which is known as the akal. And now this is a big problem for our farmers, specifically because they are dependent on crops, and if the crops fail because of drought, this is a big problem for them, and that is why government has come up with this scheme which is known as drought prone areas development program, which is specifically meant for areas which are drought prone, which are likely to have droughts. And here what happens is, whenever there are these kind of natural calamities, whenever there is a drought which is struck, then the government comes up with a scheme in which the people in these areas, they are provided wage employment and in return for work. So they are provided wage employment in return for work. Now this is what happens, and they are made to work and they are made to construct durable assets like roads, canals and plantation drives. In lieu of that, they get paid. So the whole objective is that since their crops have failed, they do not have anything to, they simply do not have any source of income, so we have to basically provide them an alternate source of income. For this, we have come up with this particular program, DPAP, the Drought Prone Areas Development Program. Now let's have a look at dams. Now dams are very very important, and you can see this is a dam here in a hilly area. Now what are dams? Now you can understand this is the reservoir, and this is the construction which has been this particular barrier has been constructed so that the water can be stored here, and when this water would be let off, it would flow down. The potential energy of water, you would have read it earlier also, the potential energy of water will get converted into kinetic energy. It will flow down with a speed, and then the turbines which are there, they would move, and the moving of turbines will produce electricity. So this is how dams produce electricity, and that is why dams are also known as hydropower projects. Now what is the purpose of dams? Number one is year-round supply of water for domestic use. What you have done is basically you have stopped some river here. So this is a river which is flowing like this. You have stopped, you have erected a barrier. Now this water is not allowed to flow freely. It would not be flowing freely to plains, and from there to the sea. It would not be emptying its water to the sea. In the sea, what will happen? It will get stored, and this water can then be used in the dry season. Again, this water can be used for irrigation purpose, for generation of electricity like I described just now. Then it can be used for commercial pisciculture. So it could so happen that this area, there could be some fishes that can be bred here, and this can be used for commercial fish rearing, and the fishes can then be sold in the market. Then leisure activities, for example, if you go to Teri Dam, you would find that in this reservoir which is there, they conduct so many leisure activities like surfing and so many other activities like this. So leisure activities can be done, boating, surfing, all these kind of activities can be conducted here. So in that sense, it also gives you an avenue to earn tourist revenue. And then what are the problems caused by dams? Basically, we've understood that these are the purposes for which we construct dams, but then what are the problems? There are so many problems associated with dams. Number one, fragmentation and physical transformation of rivers. The river is getting fragmented. See, this was the river which was flowing. Now you have fragmented. Some portion is here, the remaining portion is here, and in fact this bed of river somewhere here would remain dry most of the time, because most of the time the water would not be allowed to flow freely. The most of the time the water in the river would be blocked at this particular place, so naturally the bed would remain dry. So in this sense, the river gets fragmented and the transformation also takes place. Up till now the river water was fresh, but this water would be stale because it has been stored for a long period of time. So in that sense, physical transformation is taking place, and damage to the riverine ecosystem. Some species only prosper and grow when in freely flowing water, fresh water. They simply cannot survive in a water which is stored like this, which is stagnant for a long period of time. So it may damage the riverine ecosystem, all the species of plants and animals which are part of the river ecosystem, which grow there, which live there, which sustain their livelihood there. They would probably not be able to survive because of the construction of dams. Then the reservoir leads to the submergence of vegetation, because see what will happen, some of this part of the reservoir basically is submerging the lower part of these hills, and some of the vegetation will also get submerged. And when this happens, when the plants and the trees and the vegetation get submerged and it starts rotting underwater, then it actually produces methane, which is basically a greenhouse gas and actually contributes to global warming. So these reservoirs of these dams, they also contribute to global warming. Again, there have been studies which have documented how this reservoir which is there, the storage which is there, a lot of water is there in this particular reservoir, a lot of storage of water is there, which means it will exert an enormous pressure on the land underneath, and this pressure on the land underneath, on the surface of this reservoir, will ultimately may lead to earthquakes. So reservoir induced seismicity, the term given to these kind of earthquake is reservoir induced seismicity. Seismicity is basically earthquake. So it has been induced by the pressure of water in the reservoirs, and that is why they are called reservoir induced seismicity. Then again, silting of river would also happen. Why is silting taking place? See, up till now the water was flowing freely and it was just moving like this, and it was emptying, and since there was a lot of speed, water was flowing very fast, then it was carrying all this silt along with it, and it was depositing it at the plains only. But now, since the water is now, it has been stopped, the flow of water will reduce. What will happen? The silt which it is carrying along, silt is gad, which includes clay, very small particles of rocks, all these would be there, and they would be deposited, which would mean that you would have to, on a regular basis, clean up this reservoir. So that would be an additional cost for the dams. They will have to go for desilting on a regular basis. Otherwise, the silt would get accumulated in this portion, right? Do you understand this point? Now, and naturally, when you are constructing a big dam, if you talk about Tehri Dam, so many people in the Tehri district, they had to be displaced. In fact, the whole of the old Tehri town, it is now submerged under the reservoir. It does not exist anymore, and in fact, people were relocated to the new Tehri. So that is why what you find today is new Tehri, and old Tehri is submerged under the dam, under the reservoir of the dam. So such displacements have to take place because so many people will have to be removed. If you talk about the Pancheshwar project, which is being planned in this part of the state, Uttarakhand, in the Champaut and Pithoragarh district, there is expected that so many villages will get submerged, and so many people living in those villages will have to get displaced. So this is one major issue, humanitarian issue related to and connected to the building of dams, and that is why dams are being opposed in so many places. In fact, you might have heard of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, you might have heard of the Tehri Andolan also, which was against the construction of the Tehri Dam. Likewise, in Narmada Bachao Andolan, there was huge opposition to the construction of Sardar Sarovar Dam on the Narmada River. So generally, these kind of constructions meet a lot of popular resistance because they lead to displacement of so many people. For example, more than 1.5 crore people have till date been displaced, and most of them have been tribal communities, so they have been displaced because of construction of dams. So this is one major issue with the dams. Again, not only the people are going to get displaced, but also the animal population, their habitats would be damaged, and their migratory routes would be cut off. Earlier they were able to cross the river, but now they would not be able to cross this big reservoir. So their migratory routes are cut off, their habitats where they live and where they sustain themselves, they are lost, and the animal population also suffers because of construction of dams. So these are the issues there with the dam. And apart from the issue of cost and time overruns, if you look at the Tehri Dam, you would find out that it was supposed to start working in 2000s, but the construction got delayed by more than 10-15 years. So cost and time overruns are very much common, and many a times the promised benefits are also, they don't also materialize. So whatever is promised, whatever benefits are promised from the dam, from the construction of the dam and from the operation of the dams, generally all those benefits are generally not witnessed. They simply do not materialize. So that is why there has to be a rethinking about the dams, whether we should keep on constructing these large dams, which though they are serving some purposes, but they are creating a lot of havoc, not only for the mankind but also for the other species and for the ecosystem and for the fragile ecology of the surrounding areas, right? So with this we have concluded our discussion on dams. Now I will be talking about the sustainable water management. We have been talking about water resources. How can we manage those resources so that they are available to us, not only to us but to our future generations also, and that is what we mean by sustainable water management. Alternatives, what alternatives we have? We can, instead of big dams, we can have numerous small dams instead of few mega projects, and they would be small dams. They can be constructed at a much less cost, and they do not disturb the ecosystem, disturb the ecology of the area to that extent. So instead of going for big dams, we should go for small reservoirs. In fact, China, America, in all these places you would find so many such dams. In fact, China has more than 50,000 such small dams. Then we can do a lot of things to recharge the groundwater. Rainwater harvesting is an example. Have a look at this. Just a moment. The rainwater harvesting system is here. So we are having a look at this here. So what is happening? This rainwater now is getting harvested. This charges the underground tank which is being kept here, and this basically recharges the water table, and then this water can be used during the dry season for various purposes, not only for irrigation but for various purposes. Even if this surface here, the bottom of the tank is kept porous, the water will percolate down and will recharge the groundwater. Then we have got check dams. Now what happens with check dams? Now have a look at this structure here and then this structure here. What will happen? There is a lot of rainfall here, the water will flow, and when the water will flow from here, in this area the flow would be a little slower and the water will get opportunity to percolate down. So it would percolate down and it would actually recharge the groundwater here. Again, then this second structure has been given here. So again the water will come here, then it will move like this, and but then again here it will slow down a little bit and then it would recharge the groundwater. So this is how we can build small check dams at a fraction of a cost, and then we can save water and we can make good use of the rainwater. And this water which is there, which one it is recharging the groundwater, and for the other purpose that it is solving, it is providing us water for use during the dry season, so that we can use that water for irrigation purpose. So these can be built in our villages, and this would help our farmers also. Afforestation, again, growing more forest is an example, is an alternative that we have. More forest would mean more rainfall. More forest would also mean that the water would be able to percolate down and it would be able to recharge the groundwater table. Then we can protect our wetlands. Wetlands are area. Now this is an example of a wetland. If you talk about the Rai stream, the area surrounding the Rai stream is basically a wetland. Wetland is an area which is covered with water, and basically this acts as a, again it also acts as a sponge. Now this is a wetland. See this particular water body is here. So this area is a wetland. This may at times be covered with water. This water will come here, and whenever there is a lot of water here, it will spill down to this part, and from here the water will percolate down and recharge the groundwater table, the water table underneath. So this is one thing that we can do. We can protect our wetlands. But nowadays what is happening? People have started constructing their houses here, buildings, because we have to expand our cities. We need more residential space, more industries. So what will happen? These wetlands, they are contracting in their shape. The shapes have been, the size have been decreasing, and this means there is less opportunity for water to percolate and to recharge the water table. Then we can go for water efficient cultivation. I have given you a brief idea about water efficient cultivation. For example, I've talked about those kind of crops which require less amount of water. Now this is an example of drip irrigation. We've been talking about this. See, this hole has been punched, hole has been bored into this particular pipe, and it is feeding the roots directly. So there is less usage of water, and the water is directly reaching the intended point. It is basically feeding the roots. It's not getting wasted here or here. So there is less amount of water, less wastage, and there is less wastage in evaporation also. Had water been had this part been irrigated, then it would have got evaporated, but this is not happening. We are basically we have bored a hole here, and this basically is actually irrigating the roots. So we are able to use much less water, and still we are able to attain much higher productivity. So this is an example. And we can also go for drought tolerant seeds. We can grow in scarcity of water. We can go for recycled water. For example, in our homes also, you have got your you might be growing various plants, and there what you can do is you can use the household wastewater. For example, the wastewater from washing clothes or from bathing, that can be used in kitchen gardens. So that can be one way of recycling water. And again, one more thing that we can do is we can go for pricing, use-based pricing, which means if somebody is using up to a particular amount, he may be asked to pay a little bit for that. Up till now, if you look at the scenario, you only have to pay very nominal charges for the water supply in your homes. Now we have got to increase the charges for water supply, because once we do that, then people would start conserving water, because wasting water will lead to more expenditure on water, because then they will have to pay for that water. So once they start paying for the water, they would start wasting much less, they would start conserving much more, they might go for more efficient use of water. So this is one thing that we can do, and this should be based on the quantity that you are using. So if you are using more than a particular quantity, then the prices should be even higher. So in that sense, we should also be able to incentivize more efficient use of water. So we should be able to price the water, and the prices should be increased, the charges should be increased, and the charges should also depend on how much quantity are you using. Use of greater quantity should mean that you have to pay much more, and naturally this would incentivize you to use the water more efficiently. And then we can also prevent pipe losses, which are very, very common. These are common sites in India, so we can prevent pipe losses also. So with this I've concluded our discussion on the water resources. In the next sessions that will follow, we'll move to the other resources that we have, i.e. the mineral resources and the land resources. So we'll be talking about them later on. Till then, keep going through my lectures. Very soon we'll be having a test, so be prepared also for the test. Thank you very much.